Rover 200 Cabriolet, adding an extra dimension to Rover's highly acclaimed 200 series. During this program, we'll introduce you to the features and service procedures of this exciting new model. This program is in two parts. The first part details the Cabriolet's hood, and in the second part, we'll demonstrate the characteristics and operation of the vehicle's sophisticated anti-theft system. But first, the hood. The three fabric layers are stretched over a metal frame. This is fixed to the body by 6 bolts, 3 on either side. On the underside of the metal frame is the headlining. Next comes the quilted interlayer, keeping heat in and noise out. The flexible backlight is made from Vibac and can be unzipped to provide extra ventilation. And finally, the outer covering provides protection against the elements.
Hello. In this section, I'll take you through the new technical features and basic service procedures of the Rover 200 Cabriolet's hood. First, a very brief overview of the bodywork changes. Now, to cater for the lack of roof panels, something which gives a lot of strength to a saloon, the floor pan has been strengthened with sill reinforcements and additional sill sections. The doors too are new, they're frameless, and we have a new fixed quarter light. The B-posts extend up to meet in the middle and form a support bar, and the rear quarter panel here is made up of 2 parts. This brake line extends rearwards behind this rubbing strip, and this is where the donor Rover 200 3-door body side ends, and the rest of the rear quarter panel, together with the parcel shelf, or hood well as it's called, the rear squab panels and the boot are all entirely new. Okay, in a minute I'll show you how to raise and lower both manual and power versions of the hood, plus a few hints, tips and care points. Then we'll go through hood sealing, take a look at how the hood is actually sealed to the body, and finally I'll take you through some specific hood repairs. So how exactly does the owner go about raising and lowering the hood? Well, the first thing to do on both manual and power versions is to unlock the header, that's the front part of the hood, from the A-post locations. That's quite easy to do. Push the little locking tab on the handle up, and that will enable the handle to be lowered into its unlocked position. A small pull on the handle and the hook will release from the A-post lock. It's always a good idea before you lower the hood to push the handles back into the locked position. I'll just do the other side very quickly. Now, before I lower the hood, you'll notice that I've dropped the rear windows just by a couple of inches. That prevents the seals from chafing on the glass when the hood's raised again. Okay, so let's lower the hood into the hood well. In this position on the manual hood, you'll meet resistance, and that's where, for very obvious reasons, the manual gas struts start giving assistance. From here on in, you'll need to push the hood down into the hood well and fit the tonneau cover. Now, the electric hood's easier still. Now, I say electric, but the operation of the hood is actually electro-hydraulic. It's all controlled by a combined hood pump and motor in the boot. Here we are, an electric motor powering a hydraulic pump, feeding fluid under pressure to 2 rams acting on the hood frame. Now, when you first receive these vehicles, prior to PDI then, you'll find that the rams are isolated. Although the pump will work, it won't actually provide any fluid pressure to those rams. To bring the pump into play, you simply turn the key fully clockwise. Now, you won't have to remove the boot side carpet as I've done here. There is in fact a small inspection flap that will provide limited access to the pump. Now, the electrical circuit for the motor is quite simple, very similar to the most basic electric window circuit, with an up relay and a down relay. There are no limit switches. The pump simply whirs away at relief pressure when the rams reach the end of their stroke until the driver takes his finger off the button. Now, the only unusual feature to this circuit is that the relay, the main feed relay, is actually controlled by the handbrake warning light circuit. Now, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to work out why. Perhaps the quickest way to remove one of these hoods is to open it on the move. Seriously though, never entertain releasing those hood handles unless the vehicle is at a complete standstill. Now you probably recognise this, the transit cover, designed primarily to protect the vehicle during its passage to you in the dealerships. It is designed though to be passed on to the customer, where it will protect the outer covering in dusty conditions or where it's parked for long periods under a tree, say. Now, hood design and manufacture have come a long way since the days of midgets and Spitfires. It is still true to say, though, that even the modern Cabriolet demands more careful attention than the average hardtop. The hood outer covering, for instance, never clean that with anything other than a mild detergent solution. That goes for the headlining and the backlight. Try not to lower the hood if the backlight's particularly dirty or it may become scratched. Never use de-icer on the backlight, and I don't think I need to say this, but never use a scraper. On the subject of general care points, make sure the owner's made aware of this sticker. We suggest it's placed in the windscreen above the rear view mirror. It warns about the maximum height of both the aerial and the hood. Now, if the owner should go into an area of restricted head height with the hood down, say a multi-storey car park or something like that, then he may not be able to get the hood up again. 7 foot is the maximum height. Just lower the hood again. And then we can talk about hood sealing. Having a hood which folds down, as you can probably imagine, causes something of a sealing nightmare to designers. And what's more, the modern Cabriolet driver isn't half as tolerant of wind noise and water leaks problems as, say, the old Spitfire owner was. So where are these seals and what adjustments, if any, can you make to them? One of the most important areas to seal is along the header rail. There are in fact 2 seals here. The first of them is this one along the top of the screen, almost like a rubber finisher, which acts as a backup to the main header seal. We'll have to lower the hood to see that one. So the main header seal is actually held to the header with 2 retainers, and if I just pull the seal from the rear retainer, you'll see that this strip actually doubles as a retainer rail for the forward edge of the headlining. Now the seal is actually bonded to its forward retainer with cyanoacrylate adhesive, super glue to you and me. It's imperative that you get the retainer perfectly central to the seal before bonding it in place. Now the new seal has painted witness marks on it. Obviously that makes the job just that little bit easier. Now for any problems in this area, check for any obvious damage and also any lumps and bumps along the length of the header seal. That would indicate that it's not correctly located in either one of its retainers. Now the only seals which are adjustable on this hood are the cant rail seals, and then only the very forward ends. Very simple adjustment. You loosen this screw. That will enable you to adjust the fore and aft position of the seal on its retainer. Now the idea behind this adjustment is to get a good seal fit between the front ends of the cant rail seals and where they butt up against the A-post seals. Now this area by the A-post is quite forward facing, so any gaps there almost certainly will cause wind noise and water leaks problems, so be careful of that adjustment. Now the cant rail seals by necessity are jointed, and the join is improved by this sleeve arrangement. Now all Rover 200 Cabriolets go through a similar water test facility as their saloon counterparts, and they do perform very well. Having said that, we have a join here, and neat as it may be, you can sometimes get a small dribble of water down the inside of the door glass, which disappears down behind the door trim pad to exit through the designed-in water channels at the base of the door, so that is termed acceptable. Now bear in mind that Rover's water test facility is very severe. Water's blasted at the car from every angle at around 12 psi, not the sort of conditions you meet in everyday driving. Now the seal is held in a retainer, double-edged retainer, along its length, backed up by 2 pop rivets either side of this join. As with the header seal, check for any obvious lumps and bumps that maybe indicate the seal isn't held correctly in either side of that retainer and holding the door glass away from the seal. Now the last of the hood seals then are the D-post seals. These provide a seal against the back edge of the rear windows. To remove them, you'll find it much easier with the hood partially lowered, with the front half roughly vertical. Now with the manual hood, that's easy, that's where it sits anyway. Remember, that's the position where those manual struts start giving assistance. The power hood though will need to be chocked in this position. We'll be covering how to do that a little bit later on. However, that done, we can reach in with a pair of snipe nose pliers, release the trim studs and the seal will come away. Other than that, nothing much more to say about that depot seal. To show you the last seal, I close the hood. It's not strictly a hood seal. It's actually the door glass to B-post seal. Now obviously here what you need to check for is a good seal to glass fit along the entire length of the seal. Now if you don't get that, particularly in this top area, then don't automatically suspect the B-post seal. It may just be that the cant rail seal is perhaps not located on one of its retainers and it's holding the door glass away from the seals. So don't automatically suspect that seal. Now if you get a consistently bad fit in that area, it may just be that a small plastic ramp behind the door trim pad needs adjustment. Now during the last 10mm or so of window up movement, this ramp kicks the top edge of the door into the seal and firms the glass up in the process. So there we are, a very brief look at hood sealing. What I want to do now is take a look at hood repairs. Phase 1 repairs were released some time ago as an RIB to the Rover 200 repair manual. That covered such jobs as hood complete assembly renew, backlight renew, together with trim cases and other peripheral items. Now Phase 2 repairs are a lot more in depth and they sweep up all the rest of the hood jobs. The hood is fully serviceable and Unipart are stocking just about every hood component. However, as with all trim jobs, we recommend that you have a large clean work area set aside in your workshop with large, again, clean work surfaces. For in-depth jobs such as hood outer covering renew or perhaps frame renew, then we strongly recommend that a hood specialist is used, or at the very least a specialist area within your own dealerships. So what I'll do is take you through 3 jobs: Backlight Renew, Backlight Zip Renew and Headlining Renew, and along the way we'll take a look at the hood's construction. So firstly, we've placed protection on the rear quarter panels and the boot. We'll be releasing bracketry on the rear quarters and the backlight so we don't want to damage any of the paintwork. Now I've placed also 2-inch blocks between the top of each B-post and the hood frame. The idea behind that is to release tension from the outer covering, the headlining and the backlight, making them easier to work with. Now I've got to release the headlining from the parcel shelf area. I'll need to get in the car for that. Bit difficult, it's all a bit cramped in here. What you're looking for are 2 small fixings on either side of the parcel shelf. Remove those. I've done the other side already, and you'll be able to withdraw from the headlining what we call the tension rods. Now it's most important to remove these completely. Should you leave these in the headlining and inadvertently lower the hood, then you stand a pretty good chance of piercing either the headlining or the outer covering, something to be avoided, so take those right out. As I say, I've done the other side. The next bit is deceptively tricky. What you're trying to do is release small elastic straps at the back of the headlining from small metal loops in the base of the backlight. Sounds easy, I'm going to assure you it isn't. Very easy to snap these off if you're not careful. So like I say, take care over doing that. And you can see the headline is actually free from the back of the parcel shelf now. Just unzip the backlight, lay it in the parcel shelf, and that's me finished in here. Now the idea behind releasing the headlining from the parcel shelf area was to expose the fixings for the hood rear quarters. There are actually 3 on each bracket. I've cheated and removed all but one of them, because we need to fold these hood rear quarters up onto the hood. Now these small corner finishers, they have to come out. There we are. And now both of these rear quarters are free to be folded up onto the roof. Be very careful when doing this. Obviously there's steel brackets set in these rear quarters. Make sure they don't damage the outer covering of the hood. Velcro to detach. There we are. Fold those up, careful of those brackets. And now the backlight's almost ready to come out. It's almost free in the parcel shelf. I need to remove the backlight lower rail fixings. Open the boot for that. Confronted with a rubber finisher. To remove that, you have to take these small press studs out for the tonneau cover and the transit cover. Now this rubber finisher is actually pushed right up underneath the backlight material, and it is fairly difficult to get that back in again. Just to forewarn you about that. I won't take the other press stud fastener out. Just release the rubber strip there, and we can see 5 Torx headed screws there, TX30 Torx bit you'll need for that. I won't take this backlight out. You'll find that the centre screw, the location for that is actually just a round hole. The rest are slotted, so that's obviously a location for this lower rail of the backlight. Always put that screw in first. Okay, just address this rubber strip. Moving on to backlight zip. Now, although the zip's supplied complete, it is possible to renew either half independently of one another. So that's half attached to the flexible backlight and the other half attached to the hood frame can be replaced independently. Now when it comes to this half attached to the backlight, that is a specialist operation. You would remove the backlight in accordance with the procedure we've just given you, dispatch it with the new zip to a specialist. You must emphasise the importance to the specialist of actually applying the new zip in exactly the same position as the old. The start points must be the same. The consequences of not doing that are that when the backlight zipped up, it skews off at an angle, putting creases up the flexible backlight. Now, renewal of the upper half attached to the hood frame isn't a specialist operation, it's actually quite easy. Now, you wouldn't have had to remove these rear quarter brackets. You see the importance of the protection now. Nor would you have had to remove those rear quarter corner finishers, and the headlining can remain attached to the parcel shelf area. You would have had to fit your blocks to the B-post to release tension from the outer covering. What you need to do is lift the outer covering and drill 2 small pop rivets securing the headlining rear retainer rail. Now you must place protection on the backlight when you do that, something like a wind cover. Make sure it's adequately protected. Remember, the backlight is quite susceptible to damage, particularly when there's any hot swarf around. When you've drilled those 2 pop rivets from the rear retainer, you can actually withdraw it from the hood frame and let it drop away. That will then expose the studs which secure what we call the outer covering rear clamp rail, which is bonded into the hood outer covering. I've actually cheated and done that. One important note to mention though is that the outboard studs actually have washers on them, and there's a fair chance that as you remove the nut from the stud, the washer drops inside the hood frame, so be aware of that and be careful. Now what we have to do is to relieve tension further from the outer covering, is to place the hood in the partially lowered position with the front half vertical. Remember, the manual hood sits there anyway, that's where those manual struts start giving assistance. The power hood though doesn't, so we'll need to chock that. Now when you're doing any in-depth work on a power hood, it's a good idea to isolate those power hood rams. So isolate those, and then that can't be operated inadvertently. So lower the hood, place chocks, then in the hood frame, and we're ready to release the clamp rail and expose that upper zip. There we are, remove the clamp rail from the hood spar, and there we are, exposed the backlight zip and its retainer. It's actually supplied with its retainer. 9 pop rivets secure that to the frame. Now you drill those out and refit the new zip in exactly the same procedure. Now you may get a problem with loose rivet heads in the hood frame. These hood spars are basically blind sections almost. If you do think you're going to get a rattle problem, to cure that you can immobilise those loose rivet heads in the hood frame by locally injecting body sealing wax. be careful of contaminating any of the vehicle's trim. Okay, continuing then with our look at hood repairs. Headlining renew. We've also already seen the headlining being detached from the parcel shelf, those straps that go through the little loops in the backlight and the tension rods. There are actually two more straps which go down to the base of the hood rams. I'll need to get in the car for that. So two more elastic straps connected to the base of the rams or struts. Now at first sight it looks as though you'll have to remove the rear quarter trim casings to get access to those. It is quite easy to release them though with the trim casings in situ. By reaching down between the ram and casing to release the clip, it's always a good idea to remove this clip from the strap just to prevent any damage, any possible damage to the headlining should the hood be inadvertently lowered. Now I've removed the other trim casing so you can get a closer look at actually where it connects at the base of the strut. And as you can see, once you get a bearing on where it actually connects to, it is a fairly simple operation. Now what I need to do is release the headlining from the header rail. So to release the headlining from the header, first I'll need to remove 4 trim studs either side of the hood handles. There we are. Then release the header seal from that rear retainer we saw earlier, which doubles as a retainer for the forward edge of the head lining. Now it has 6 screws in it. I've removed all but 2. Just quickly remove those then. The forward edge of the headline is actually stuck to the header rail. Refer to the manual for the correct type of adhesive to use. So that done, the retainer strip out of the way, release the headlining carefully from the header rail. And what we're working up to doing now is to expose the remaining headlining fixings, which unfortunately are below the hood outer covering and interlayer. So we need to unbolt the header rail and fold it back onto the boot. Now I've removed 2 of the 4 header screws. I'll loosen these. I've loosened those cant rail seal clamps. So collect those with the screws. There we are. Now you have to mark the header rail prior to loosening these screws. The best way to do that is probably with some strips of masking tape, because you have to ensure that the header rail goes back in exactly the same position. So now I need to fold the header rail together with the interlayer and the outer covering back onto the boot. So with assistance we can now lift the header off and, complete with the outer covering and interlayer, fold it onto the boot to reveal the remaining headlining fixings. Here we are, 6 brackets pot riveted to the frame. Now when you've removed the headlining, you'll obviously have to swap all the components, the bows, rear retainer rail and brackets over to the new headlining. There are a couple of very important points to note. Now as you're fitting these brackets, as you thread the headlining bows into the headlining, be very careful. It is possible to get them upside down. If you do, they'll show through the outer covering. Now again with the brackets, the same bracket is used on the thin forward spar as on the thicker rearward spar. When pot riveting the brackets to the forward spar, use the rearward hole, and the rear spar, use the forward hole. Now as with all the jobs we've covered so far, the refit procedure is pretty much the reversal of the removal procedure. There are 2 very important checks to make though. So 2 checks to make. We'll show them on this car with the outer covering stripped away for clarity. Now earlier we marked the position of the header rail, so all being well that's gone back in exactly the same position. We do however recommend that that's checked. What you basically do is check the distance between this striker pin on the header and A-post striker plates set into the A-posts. We measure the distance between them with the striker pin held level with the top of the striker plate, and you're looking for between 6 and 8 millimeters. Now unfortunately, if you don't get that dimension, you can't just go ahead and adjust the header rail. The reason you can't do that is because you have cables set into the cant rail areas of the outer covering. This firms them up and stops them flapping in the wind. Adjust the header and you risk snapping the cables. They're not easy to change. What you'll have to do is place the hood in the partially lowered position and release all tension from the cables. You can gain access between the headlining and the outer covering, wind the lock nut back, the adjusting nut right back, remove all tension. As I say, that done, you can then adjust the header rail to the desired position. Now, when it comes to adjusting the cant rail cables, you'll need to close the hood and check cable adjustment using an O-series timing belt tool and a spring balance. Apply a specific load and measure the deflection of the cable. Okay, there we are, a brief look at the service procedures and technical features of the Rover 200 Cabriolet.
The anti-theft system fitted to all new Cabriolet models is a comprehensive system that offers the vehicle protection on both the inside and the outside of the car. A volumetric system protects the inside of the car, while a perimetric system is used to protect the outside. As you might have expected, an electronic control unit is used to control the system, and you'll find it mounted behind the radio, screwed to the back of the cassette storage tray. This same ECU also controls the central door locking system, which is only operational from the driver's door, either by moving the seal button or by using the key. Now, another point I'll just quickly mention is that it is possible to slam lock the vehicle with or without the ignition on, although that won't arm the alarm. Okay, to arm the alarm, all you need to do is lock the vehicle using the key in the driver's door. It can also be fully armed from the passenger side, but only if the driver's door is locked, remembering that central door locking only works from the driver's door. If the alarm's been successfully armed, then you'll see the Confidence Confirmed Telltale Lamp, or CCT. That's a red LED on the instrument panel labelled alarm. Will flash quickly for 10 seconds before it slows to flash at a rate of 1 flash per second. It will then continue to flash at that rate until the alarm is disarmed, so serves as a visual deterrent for any would-be thieves. The perimetric side of the system arms immediately the vehicle's locked, while the volumetric side will be armed approximately 35 seconds after that. And that 35 seconds will give your furry dice and the like enough time to stop swinging once you've parked the vehicle to avoid the possibility of them triggering a false alarm. Incidentally, operation of the starter motor is automatically inhibited as soon as the alarm is armed. To start with, I'll explain how the perimetric system works. That's the system which protects the outside of the vehicle. Here, the ECU monitors a total of 10 switches. So that's the barrel switch, sill switch and door open switch on both doors, a barrel switch and load space lamp switch on the boot, bonnet switch, and finally the ignition switch. The alarm will be triggered by an unauthorised opening or unlocking signal from either two doors or the boot lid, an unauthorised opening signal from the bonnet, or indeed by an attempt to switch the ignition on. If I just demonstrate that by lifting the sill switch, once triggered, the vehicle's horns would sound for 30 seconds before they go quiet for 60 seconds while the alarm resets. Then, as soon as the ECU senses another unauthorised signal following that reset period, the horns would again sound for another 30 seconds and so on. To disarm the alarm, as I did there, you'll need to unlock the vehicle using the key in either the driver's or passenger's door. I'll just rearm the alarm. Again, CCT flashes to confirm that we've armed the alarm successfully. Now we'll look at the volumetric side of the system, which, as I mentioned before, arms 35 seconds after the perimetric side and protects the front portion of the passenger compartment. Other vehicles, such as the Rover 800 series, use an ultrasonic sensor to detect air movement and inform the ECU of an intrusion into the passenger space. Obviously, it's not possible to use that system on a vehicle fitted with a soft top, as the air inside this space is never allowed to stabilise. So to get over this problem, we fit this, a Doppler volumetric module, or DVM as it's known. You'll find it clips to the bottom of the cassette storage tray behind the centre console and builds up a picture of its immediate surroundings each time the alarm is armed, informing the ECU if it detects an intrusion into this space. And the beauty of this system is that it will work just as well with the hood down as it does while the hood's up. Now the vehicle's horns would sound for 30 seconds before going quiet and resetting. The volumetric side of the system then won't trigger the alarm again until it's seen at least 1 minute's worth of non-alarm state. That's to ensure the volumetric side doesn't trigger the alarm more than once for each intrusion into the vehicle. That's slightly different to the perimetric system, which, as I said before, would immediately trigger the alarm as soon as it sees another unauthorised signal following that reset period. Now, it is possible to arm the perimetric side of the alarm without arming the volumetric side. And to do this, you'll need to press the Volumetric Disable switch, which you'll find just to the left of the steering column, and you'll need to press it while it's lit, which will be up to a minute after the ignition has been turned off. Arm the alarm in the same way. Again, the CCT flashes to confirm that we've armed the alarm successfully. Now, normally the volumetric side of the system would be armed 35 seconds after the perimetric side. And as you can see, it no longer detects my arm moving into that space. And the volumetric side will be automatically reactivated the next time the ignition's switched off. Now, another part of this comprehensive system is its Mislock feature. That's something you've seen before on the Rover 800 series, where if you try to lock the vehicle with a panel open, it would alert you via an audible warning and refuse to set the alarm. Here it's slightly different. If I just release the bonnet and arm the alarm, there's obviously no audible warning. What's more important is there's no fast flash from the CCT before going into its 1 flash per second mode. That's confirming that the alarm is only partially armed. In this condition, everything but the panel which caused the mislock and the volumetric system will be armed. So in this particular case, everything but the bonnet and the interior of the vehicle will be fully protected. If I lift the sill button, there, the alarm goes off. I've armed the vehicle again with the bonnet released. Still no fast flash from the CCT. Now, if required, the vehicle can be left in that condition for an indefinite period, but it's obviously more secure if you've got the alarm fully armed. So to move from the mislock condition to the fully armed state, all you need to do is close the offending panel which caused the mislock. So that's the bonnet in this case. Now, you'll notice that when you move from the mislock condition to the fully armed condition, the CCT will fast flash for 10 seconds before it again reverts back to its 1 flash per second mode. Now, like the Rover 800 series, this system will let you open the boot without the need first to disarm the alarm, providing you use the key to open it, of course. Then, as soon as the boot lid closes, the alarm will be reactivated. Now, there is one thing that you and your customers will need to be aware of, though, and that's the need to operate the key swiftly, as the alarm ECU must receive a boot open signal within 1.5 seconds of receiving a key switch signal. If it doesn't, then the alarm will be triggered. Now, this feature has been introduced to make it even more difficult for the thief to illegally disarm the system. And it's the same for the arm and disarm signals the ECU receives from both front doors. So when you're locking the vehicle, you'll need to make sure you move the key swiftly. If you don't, then the alarm won't arm. You'll get no flash at all from the CCT if that happens. And if you move it too slowly when unlocking the car, then you'll not disarm the alarm, and it will trigger as soon as the seal button moves. Now, just a quick word about connecting the battery, which is obviously something you'll come across in service. The alarm will be armed immediately the battery is connected up, and that will be confirmed by the CCT flashing in its 1 second mode. So it's recommended that as soon as it's connected, the alarm's disarmed. If you don't and you trigger the alarm, as I will here by opening the door, the alarm will go off. But it will go off at a reduced rate, and it will do that for about 15 seconds. And it's basically telling me that the alarm is just about to go off at its full rate, so it gives me time to disarm the alarm before it does so. So that's why it's important to disarm the alarm immediately the battery is connected up. So that's it, the alarm system and its operation. Now I'll just quickly run through its self-test mode, which can be used to check all the inputs and outputs from the alarm ECU. It's best to have 2 keys available during this test, as you'll need to leave one in the ignition and you'll need to use the other to check all the barrel switches. If there's only 1 key available, then the barrel switches will need to be checked for continuity using an ohm meter in the normal manner. Now, to enter the diagnostic mode, you'll need to start with the vehicle unlocked with the ignition off. Then lock the passenger door sill switch, switch the ignition on, then off, then back on again, and then unlock the passenger door sill switch. And you'll need to carry out that sequence within 2 seconds to enter the diagnostic mode successfully. If you have, as we heard there, you will hear the horn briefly sound. Now, we're in this condition, all but the passenger sill switch and the ignition switch will make the CCT and the Volumetric Disable switch lamp flash. If there's no flash when you operate a switch, then a fault is indicated, a more thorough diagnosis is required. You'll automatically know that the passenger sill switch and the ignition switch circuits are okay if you've been allowed to enter the self-test mode. Once you've finished testing the perimetric side of the system, you can move on to test the volumetric side by pressing the Volumetric Disable switch, providing you've been in the test mode at least 35 seconds, of course. The disable switch lamp and the CCT will both give a half-second flash to confirm you've moved from the perimetric side to the volumetric test. And now the CCT will give another flash when the DVM detects movement, if it's okay. Now, there's an additional feature of the system I should mention at this point that comes into play if the vehicle's parked by the side of a busy road or constantly buffeted by wind, and that's its auto thresholding ability. And that's where the area inside the car that the DVM monitors is automatically reduced. That avoids the possibility of ornaments hanging from the rear view mirror, for example, triggering the alarm off in a false alarm condition. So if you've been in the test mode for more than 3 minutes, you may find that it has reduced that sensitivity. So you may need to move your hand in quite close to the unit to trigger it off. So you'll need to be careful during this part of the test, and don't be caught out condemning a DVM which is in fact in good working order. Once you've moved from the perimetric side of the test to the volumetric side, you'll notice that none of the switch signals make the CCT flash. And then to exit the test mode, all you need to do is turn the ignition off. So that's it, the Cabriolet alarm system. As I've said, it's a comprehensive system that offers the vehicle a very high level of security, but it's a system that should cause you few problems, provided it's operated correctly. Now we'll have a quick look at another of the Cabriolet's features, the mast aerial. You'll find it mounted on the right-hand rear quarter panel, and it's fitted to both models. You'll either have an electrically operated aerial or a manually operated aerial, depending on the spec of the car. The electrically operated aerial will extend automatically as soon as the radio is switched on, and then remain extended until the radio or the ignition is switched off. During PDI, you'll be asked to fit this sticker to the windscreen above the rear view mirror, and that basically highlights the fact that in the extended position, both aerials reach an overall height of 2 meters. So you need to be careful when driving the vehicle in areas of restricted height. To avoid damage occurring during delivery on vehicles fitted with an electric aerial, the operation of the radio will have been inhibited by the removal of fuse 17. So you'll need to replace that fuse before checking the operation of the radio at PDI in the normal way.